200 meters, 300 meters, 400 meters, between the Japanese seniors home and Bemidji and there.
Through the chair, it's about 350 meters.
So when you did your study, you how much did you distribute? How far was your distribution? The encatchment, was it 120 meters, 300 meters, half a kilometer?
Through the chair, when we looked at the land uses and the way the official plan has land designated in this area, and I'll put up the map.
So, but
That's the big map.
what I'm trying to ask the question is, when you officially, your first time that you send the flyers out, the notice, that you send the notice out that there was, something was happening, how far and wide was the distribution?
Oh, okay. The notice, as amended by Councillor Crawford after the preliminary report came to council for the community meeting, encompassed 2,500 addressees. It went up to all the buildings on the north side of Eglinton, down Markham, all the way down to Hill Crescent, but only on the north side of Hill Crescent, and out to Scarborough Golf Club Road.
It was well distributed.
Yes.
In the first meeting, how many people did turn up?
About 70 to 80 people came to each meeting.
Okay, so it was well-attended meeting.
Yes, they were.
Did you hear any objections that, like we heard here today, about sidewalks and children and traffic?
Yes, we did hear all of those things at both of those meetings.
So in your deliberations and through the different departments, all those were addressed? Like buildings, transportation, and everything else, this was addressed?
In our opinion, and according to the final report, yes, they were addressed.
If this was to be turned down today, could the applicant go to the OMB?
They could at any time choose to go to the OMB.
And if they were to go to the OMB can return back with a 25-story tower of office use?
Well, that would really depend on what they wanted to go to the OMB to approve.
Okay, can they get approval for a higher elevation of a building? Like, can they get 15 stories, 20 stories?
Well, I think what would happen is the OMB would look at the applicable policies and guidelines, and one of the most important ones is that Kingston Road is an avenue, and we have, along the avenues, planning has the avenue and mid-rise building guidelines, and the maximum height there would be the same height as the width of the street, which could be 12 stories.
Okay, so they will go higher. Should we decide to go through with this, I guess the neighborhood can go to the OMB in the similar situation.
Correct. The neighborhood could appeal a decision once it becomes final at City Council.
And it's a double-edged sword. If they go, the applicant can get higher also. As if we turn it down, the applicant can also go and get higher.
They could, yeah.
I'm not sure if you were around or if you got any information, but what happened at the time when the buildings across the street were put on? Was there such a big fight by the neighborhood?
Through the chair, I'm afraid I was not here at that time, so I don't have any information on that.
Does anybody of staff through the chair remember?
Madam Chair, I think I can address that question. The Markington Square development occurred roughly 6 to 8 years ago. I was here as a planning manager at the time, dealing with the north part of the Scarborough district. However, I do recall that as part of the application for residential intensification of an existing commercial plaza and site, that the city also did a revitalization study around the application, and so it was a very significant review, including quite a bit of community consultation. It's my recollection, and I'm not 100% certain, that when it came to community council and council, it was adopted and approved. as an application. I don't recall an OMB hearing regarding that, but I'm not 100% certain.
Thank you, Mr. Giuliani. Through the chair, is this an appropriate use of that space, or can?
We believe so, yes, and that's what the report says.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Councillor Shan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just around the questions, I mean, I'm getting a little bit of two stories in some ways. One is that this space, this particular area is zoned for possibly a 20-plus floor development, and then on the other side, there are some that believe this is zoned for only 4 floors. So can you clarify what can be done with that space technically?
Through the chair, there's been a lot of confusion about this, and so you're not alone, Councillor. The official plan designation for this particular lot, and again, for the lots on the south side of Kingston Road, I'll just put that up. This little stretch here and everything that's in the yellow is designated neighborhoods, not zoned under the official plan. We don't use that term, we use designation. So that's designated neighborhood. The ones that are in the orange are designated apartment neighborhood, and the ones in the red are designated mixed use. And they have different meanings. None of them, except the neighborhoods, has a height limit. In the neighborhoods designation, there's a couple of policies that speak to development in neighborhoods should be no more than 4 stories. Now that said, Council has approved a number of applications around the city that have proposed something higher than 4 stories in a couple of different ways, either by attaching a site and area specific policy to a specific parcel, which is what we are proposing here, or to redesignate the property away from neighborhoods into a different designation, which we are also proposing here. They're not normally done both at the same time, but we felt the added protections of doing both were appropriate in this particular instance.
So is that the other designation or the other zoning to allow for 20-story plus building?
Right.
Simultaneously has happened. So were they done during different periods, and they were done through different departments? I'm trying to figure out how that could contradict each other when it's both coming from the city of Toronto.
Yes, I apologized. I only told half of the story. So the other half is the zoning. And the zoning is meant to implement the official plan, but it often lags behind because usually nothing happens until somebody requests a change in zoning. So the zoning that applies here is a highway commercial zoning. And the reason it's called highway commercial zoning is because at one point Kingston Road was Highway 2, and it was considered a highway, and the kinds of uses that you allowed along there were the things you still see today, which are used car lots and motels and gas stations and a car wash in this case, and a variety of other kinds of things. Nobody had made an application until this point to change and update that zoning. And the highway commercial zoning did not have a height limit to it.
Now, so we have 2 different types of neighborhood designations, neighborhoods and apartment neighborhoods. When were these designations made? Like what year?
The official plan was first adopted by council in 2002. It was then immediately appealed by a number of parties. Those appeals were resolved, and an OMB order was issued in 2006, which is when the official plan came into full force and effect. So it's been around for 11 years, but the designations and whatnot were proposed about 15 years ago.
So the philosophy behind it is that the apartment neighborhoods and the other neighborhoods have to be separate, and in many parts of Scarborough, particularly in the northern part of Scarborough, in Agent Court and so on, we have a mixed, where apartments and a part of a neighborhood from our point of view. How was this thought process around separating out apartments as separate from the neighborhoods and so on?
So through the chair, the official plan that we're working off of today, the larger context of that was actually amalgamation. There were official plans for all the separate boroughs in the past, and once the mega city, the new city of Toronto, was created, it was important to bring all of those disparate approaches to development together in a single document. And it took a few years, but that's what we wound up with in this official plan. So a big theme in the official plan was to try to knit together a number of different approaches to come to some kind of common approach going forward. So a lot of what we see, particularly out in the suburban areas, we see that the old official plans in some way were basically mirrored in the new official plan designations, although the designations are actually somewhat different. This particular property in the old official plan was designated as medium-density residential, but that had a different meaning than it does in Toronto, and so by whatever deliberations happened 15 years ago, it was decided to label it as neighborhoods.
Great. And now to Councillor Hart.
Yes, question of staff. One of the deputants mentioned that the building will diminish water issues in the community. Can you comment on that statement?
So through the chair, yes, there's been a lot of discussion about water issues in the area and what potential impact the building might have. To be fair, there's been an ongoing review and engineering information that's being pulled together, brought forward, but we didn't let this item come to council until those things were finished. However, the last time we met with the community, at that time, it was proposed that the building would be watertight, and so I believe the feeling by the community is that that would create a displacement issue. Since then, the rest of the engineering work has been completed. A sanitary and storm sewer capacity analysis has been completed. It's been determined that there's enough capacity that they can actually collect and pump water as normal developments do. Toronto Water owns that and operates the water and sanitary and sewer and storm sewer infrastructure, and they have raised the bar lately on how much information they want before they're willing to accept pumping. So one of their options that they have put out there is, if you want to avoid us raising that bar, declare your building watertight. So a lot of people have tried that route. In this particular case, because there is water around there, and it's been determined that the capacity is there to collect and pump, as a normal drainage tile and sump pump system would do. That's the approach that they're proposing.
Great. Okay, thank you. And to Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you. So I had some questions about the traffic plan. There's been a lot of concerns about the volume of traffic, and I don't know who I addressed that to. So the proponent would have had a traffic plan or traffic study done, the impact of their development on the local community.
Correct.
That would have been reviewed by city staff?
Yes, it was reviewed by City Transportation Services staff.
Okay, because the feeling amongst a lot of the residents that, in particular here today, they feel that almost the complete opposite of the traffic study that was done. The people living in this building are going to mostly use Bethune and Hillcrest and Markham Road to do shortcut in and out of the community, but that's not what the study found.
The study looked at what would be the quickest, easiest, and most logical way to move, and I'll draw it on the map if that's okay. So the building's proposed in this piece of property that's surrounded on all sides by roads, and if people are leaving there in the morning, let's say that would be the typical movement. There are roughly 30 outbound trips in the peak hour. So 30 in an hour, one car every 2 minutes on average. And what the traffic specialist determined would be the most logical route if they wanted to go west is this. either of those two routes. The other option that people have is to go this way. Which they could do. Nobody's blocking them from doing that. But it's probably not any quicker. It's probably slower to do that. I'm not sure, but the traffic report concluded that, and so it focused its efforts on this analysis of this movement.
Okay. And then the service road, I think is what it's officially called. So the traffic that would come out of this building, is that detrimentally affecting the capacity of the service road in morning rush hour to the point where you would come out of that building and go, you know what, I'm gonna take the longer route through Hill Crescent or Bethune down to Markham Road?
Well, I'm not a traffic specialist, so I should probably defer this to the traffic specialist who is here in the room and could probably answer that. But what I will say this, Councillor, is I spent 2 mornings parked here and here monitoring traffic. And what people are saying is correct. There's a lot of traffic on Hill Crescent. It mostly actually comes up the hill from down on Bethune and then goes that way. 2 cars came down Muir Drive in the hour and 40 minutes that I was there the one morning, and then about 3 cars went up Bethune Drive in the hour that I was there on the second day.
Okay. And then the other concern was students in particular walking along Hill Crescent. Was there a lot of student movement observed while you were there? Did you notice a lot of pedestrian traffic that would be students going back and forth along Hill Crescent to school?
I noticed some pedestrian traffic. I'm not certain as to whether I was there during peak school times of the year, so I'll be very honest about that. I'll say it never took me more than a couple of seconds of waiting before I could cross the street on Hill Crescent. And there was a school bus that came up Muir Drive to go to the school here at one time.
And then in terms of motor vehicle collisions or pedestrian collisions, was that reviewed at all?
That would have been reviewed in the traffic impact study.
Okay, all right. And sorry, and then the last question I had was about stacked townhouses. If you were to take this piece of property and the developer instead did stacked townhouses, would in your opinion, ballparking, would the number of motor vehicles in the development, would it be more or less than what's being presented or submitted in this application?
Again, I think I would probably have to defer to the transportation services staff and the traffic consultant. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable speculating on that.
Can I get that answer?
Is there somebody from transportation here, or we can circle back around if they're not here right now?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm here covering for the Acting Director, Ms. Carla Hinks. And we have staff here. The traffic planning staff did review the traffic impact study. So the questions regarding the traffic impact study, I'll defer to Mr. Bob Taylor, the Manager of Traffic Planning and Right-of-Way Management.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, this development, as we look at peak periods, was only going to be an average of less than 1 vehicle per minute during the peak periods. As for the question regarding stacked townhomes, from what we've seen recently coming into us, a lot of them are going with underground parking, so they can put more units in, and I would take a guess that we would have equivalent.
Okay, and are you also able to answer my previous question about traffic collision and pedestrian collisions on Hill?
I don't have those figures with me regarding collisions.
Yes, back to
Through you, Madam Chair, in terms of traffic operations experience in general about Hill Crescent and collisions, we're not aware of Hill Crescent having any major collision history that we need to be concerned about. There was reference in the public deputations to a fatality on Hill Crescent, and the only fatality that I'm aware of in the last 10 years would be one in early 2009 involving 2 vehicles. I think it might have been linked to high-speed collision. I'm not aware of any pedestrian fatalities in this area.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Great. Thank you. And over to Councillor Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. When I look at this site, and I'm thinking of the proposed Eglinton East LRT, would this site be in the corridor of the Eglinton LRT?
Through the chair, would be very, very close to the Eglinton East LRT. I believe a stop is proposed somewhere around in this green area, which would literally be a 1 to 2 minute walk depending on the red lights.
Would this site be then be viewed in terms of intensification of use?
Well, we look at the applications in terms of the provincial policies, and the provincial policies stress very much intensification along high priority transit corridors. Our official plan also identifies both Eglinton and Kingston Road as high priority transit corridors. So yes, that did factor into the analysis.
So not on this property, but all along Kingston Road as well, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir?
All along Kingston Road up to Morningside, because it's the route of the proposed LRT?
Correct, although I would say that north of the rail corridor, that portion of Kingston Road went through a city-led avenue study some years ago and was upzoned at that time in consideration of it being a revitalized corridor.
Thank you.
And Councillor DeBaremaker, any questions? No, seeing none. Okay, I just have a few questions. So just back to the question of neighborhoods designation. So currently, when was it designated? Was there an avenue study done here?
There was not an avenue study done here. There was for the Markington Square application, there was an avenue segment study done, which is a developer-led analysis. That more or less took a look at what they call soft sites, sites that would be easily redeveloped, and what kind of development form it would take, but it really took its cue from the official plan designations at the time.
Okay, and so at the time of, when was it designated as neighborhoods then?
To the chair, it was designated neighborhoods with the official plan being adopted, so 2002.
Okay, so 2002, and then any changes in that designation since then?
No, this would be the application that proposes to change it.
Okay, and I know that the same thing happens in my area where the height restriction is to the width of the road. Can you explain that?
Yes, to the chair. This comes down to urban design and what makes for a comfortable looking street and a comfortable feel on a street. And the feeling on that is that if buildings are no higher than the street is wide, people don't feel crowded in by the development that's on the street. There's also an issue of light. So as we get into walls of tall buildings, that of course reduces the amount of light and particularly direct sunlight onto the street, where we want to maintain a minimum of 5 hours of continuous sunlight at any one point on these streets. The mid-rise form of buildings allows us to do that. The mid-rise guidelines, which were adopted by council and planning staff directed to utilize those in 2010, that's the first design parameter, is that the height should be no higher than the width of the street. What happens on the backside, though, is equally important and very important in this area because that's where the neighborhood is. And if you look across the city, you see all these buildings that have these terraces on the back. And that's a function of another parameter that we have, which is an angular plane. And how the angular plane works is if you walk up to the building at the point where the angular plane hits the ground, those terraces you actually can't really see anymore. You only see the first 3 or 4 stories. The rest of them they're terraced back, so you don't see them. You start to see them the further away you are. And of course, the further away you are, you're further away, so there's less impact of the height of the building. And that's one of the main reasons that we do the angular planes, is because we found that that has a real noticeable feel effect on the ground for particularly the properties that are next door to where something's being proposed. So those are two ways that height and shape of the building are influenced and directed by these guidelines. There's 35 different parameters, so there's a whole lot of other things to look at, but those are two key aspects that help shape these buildings.
But those two situations right there, parts of the policy, are not for neighborhoods though, correct? Because the height in the neighborhoods designation, this case, is 4 stories, is that right?
That's correct. It wouldn't, well, we would still apply angular planes if there's something big proposed right next door to somebody's house. In this case, there's a street that's in between. So we take the angular planes from the nearest property line across the street on the other side. But yes, in neighborhoods, mid-rise is defined in our planning language as between 5 and 12 stories.
Yes.
So in the neighborhoods 4 and below, they wouldn't necessarily apply.
Okay, and then so for this one, it's 4 and below, and if it were to succeed and go to the change of designation, then what height are we talking about?
If the designation amendment is approved, there's 2 parts to the amendment. The first one is to change the designation from yellow neighborhoods to orange apartment neighborhoods. There's no height limit to apartment neighborhoods. So in order to ensure that it stays as the 9-story, it's not 8, not 10, it's 9, the 9-story building, then the second part of the proposed amendment comes into play, which is the proposed site and area specific policy that specifies 9 stories and 28 meters.
Okay, so that's what because I know that other numbers were thrown around, such as 20 and 25 stories, but if this were to pass today, the report from planning and your report, which is before us today, that one would have a height restriction of 9 stories.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And any further questions from Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's the question a little more general. We've been talking about the designation of this particular site as neighborhood. So when you go down Kingston Road, 4 or 5 kilometers down into Birchcliff, in this area, Kingston Road is 6 lanes wide, and in Birchcliff, it's only 4 lanes wide. And we have a number of applications, condos that are coming in anywhere from 4 up to 8, and I think 9 stories. Is Birchcliff in that area, is it designated neighborhoods as well? Because it seems to be that it is a neighborhood from my perspective, just because you have houses right behind. But what's the designation of that area?
Through the chair, most of Kingston Road through Birchcliff is designated mixed-use areas. It's still an avenue, so the avenue and mid-rise building guidelines would apply. However, there was a study done for Birchcliff that came out with some different parameters, and so those are the ones that are being applied now to look at those proposals.
Okay, and I think the highest height in that area is 9 stories, I believe, 9 or 10 stories?
Yes, I believe so, but I think there is a project that went up to 12.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And any further questions? Seeing none, and then we'll just go to speak. And Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to thank everybody for the patience, and this has been a long morning. And to begin, I want to thank staff, our staff, the city staff, for the professionalism and the work that they've done over the last number of years on this particular application. It was mentioned in some of the deputations that our staff were disrespectful, and I take personal affront to that. I was at all the meetings, and as much as a meeting, and we've all been through public meetings, and they are contentious, and they have a lot of people with a lot of different views, and they're not the easiest meetings, and I understand that. And these 2 meetings that we had with the community were challenging meetings for our staff and also for the applicant, but our staff were incredibly professional at all times in their capacity, in their roles, to be able to work through, as I said, these meetings. The second meeting we had was not a statutory meeting. We did not, as according to the planning or the Planning Act, have to have a second meeting.
We had the first statutory meeting, but I felt it was really important to go to the applicant and to go to our staff and say, there are still questions by this community, and I was hearing them. So we had this second meeting. And I want to thank the applicant, I want to thank the applicant for, number one, agreeing to this, because they technically didn't have to. And if they wanted to put up a wall, if they wanted to fight this, they could have easily done that. But they came out knowing it was going to be a tough meeting, know it was going to be a challenging meeting, and and through my insistence, I guess, they did this. Second meeting was very challenging, and a lot of the people here today expressed that, and a lot of the people here today were actually there. But I just wanted to very upfront thank, the staff for that, and also the applicant for the work. This has been in the works for easily 3 or 4 years. This has not been an easy process. And I also want to thank the community. They are passionate, absolutely, and they are passionate for a reason, because they care about the community. And I do not, when I look at, again, the passion that they bring today and the passion they brought to those communities, they have every right to be able to do that. And they did bring that there. And as I said, they were contentious meetings and they were challenging meetings, but I want to thank them, number one, for their commitment to the community and the organization. I have been, and as I said, we've all been to meetings where communities come out and they may complain, they may support, but this community came out and they were very organized. I had the opportunity to sit down with a number of them to kind of guide them through the process of what it looks like and how you get through this kind of a process. And I just wanted, and they've listened, and I think they, as passionate as they were, they came out today. And one good example would be, don't come out, don't have 30, 40 people coming out. Have 4, 5, 6 people come out and be very specific on the points you want to make and make sure those points are planning related. And I think they did that, so I want to thank them on that. We have, and with respect, I hope I could have a couple of extra minutes on this, Madam Chair, because I had to say that. We have incredible amounts of transformation happening on Kingston Road, not only in my ward, but in Councillor Ainsley's, Councillor Hart's, and even going to Councillor Mary McMahon all along Kingston Road. We have 30,000 people, 50,000 people moving into this city every year. And yeah, they're going up downtown, but they're also starting to spread out into our communities. And the official plan, has rules and guidelines about density. We have mid-rise guidelines that are there. And I have many applications, 4, 6, 11, 12, and I think some are coming 13, 14 stories along Kingston Road. The question that we have to ask right on this particular application is this the appropriate development for this site? I think that is the question we all have to ask, and we're going to make a decision based on that. We've heard that the zoning is commercial, but the designation is neighborhood. They don't kind of mix, they don't correlate, and there's a bit of a confusion there. But as the local councillor, I've heard this community. I have a petition of over 1,062 petitions that have come in, and I've listened to them, and I feel it is my duty and my responsibility to listen to that community, and I want to thank them for the work they've done. So I will not be supporting this application. Moving through, I feel that the community has the right to be heard, and I'm their representative, so I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
And next up is Councillor DeBermaker.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to actually move that we adopt the staff recommendations that are in the report. I think our objectives are the same, but maybe our opinions are certainly different. What I sense is we're really arguing over about 4 stories of height. I don't think I heard anyone today say we are against a building or we are against people coming into our community. They're not against any of those things. They don't like the, and if my memory's correct, I heard people say 4 stories would be okay, but not 8 stories. So really this fight is over 8 stories. And I have to put that into the context as an elected councillor with the knowledge that there are 1 million people moving into the GTA by 2031. All of our provincial policy statements, all of our growth targets, all of our legally mandated requirements say there are 1 million more people moving into the GTA, many of them coming in south of Steeles. They're coming in from around the world. They're coming in from across Canada. They're coming in from across Ontario. This city is wealthy, it's vibrant, it's alive. People want to live here. And people want to live in Scarborough too. So when I look at that volume of people coming into our city, coming into Scarborough, they've got to live somewhere. And if we don't go up, we have to go out. But many of us in this chamber supported and continue to support the creation of the Rouge Valley National Park. We don't want housing out there north of the zoo. We don't want housing on the Oak Ridges Moraine. We don't want to pave over our farm fields. So either we go up or we go out. And I look at this site and this fight over 4 stories and some of the concerns people have, and I think, but the Japanese Community Center, which is taller than this building, was built a couple of decades ago. It hasn't hurt these people's quality of life. They actually, many of them, or some of them, have purchased their houses after the Japanese Cultural Center and Health Center was created. There's a 9-story building there today. It was there 10 years ago when they bought their houses. They're very nice people who live in that cultural center. They go for walks. They walk along Hill Crescent that still doesn't have sidewalks to this day. So I look at the, quote, precedent that was set decades ago of allowing a seniors building there that's 9 stories. It hasn't destroyed the community. It's still a sought-after neighborhood. House prices are still going up. It's a beautiful place to live. So when I look at the staff report, certainly if this was in my ward, I would be saying, grab this, because this application protects the community. It gives you, if some people might call it a devil, it gives you a devil that you know. It's a project that's 9 stories tall. I don't consider it a devil. I actually think it's a very good development application. A lot of people who came here again today didn't complain about this, that, or the other thing, about the building, about the unit size, about the profile of people who might be moving into their community. They didn't argue against the building, it was against the height. And I look at this and I go, again, for some of us who have been around a while, the official plan can say anything it wants. Once you have zoning on a site, zoning is your legal right. And if you are zoned whatever it may be, that's what you're allowed to build. There can be an office tower here, there can be a hotel here, there can be a banquet hall in that hotel. There can be all sorts of things here that would be uses that would be, I would say, have an impact greater, much greater than this current application. They're going to have a sleepy, charming, mid-rise condo development close to their community. And those people will walk down Hill Crescent just like the rest of them. Their kids will go to the same school. They'll walk their dogs. They'll exchange stories about who's a good vet or where you get good samosas or whatever you want to do. So I look at this and I think, well, again, we're fighting over 4 stories where some of the people who are objecting this application actually live in a 20-story building. People in a 20-story building are saying, this extra 4 stories across the street is too much. And my response is, no, I don't think it's too much. If anything, I actually thought when I first saw the application, 1, that it was underutilization of the site, but 2, my eyes popped out when I saw highway commercial. Highway commercial is the Wild West. It's an old zoning. And they have rights, and maybe if this community got its way because they think this is a bad project, and if they were successful, the developer might just put it on the open market and say, you know what, I'm flustered, I'm frustrated, I'm just going to sell it to somebody. And he'll sell it to somebody who will walk in here with a proposal that the residents won't like, but we'll all approve it. Because if somebody came in here with a 20-story office proposal, I can guarantee you this community council would probably approve it, and certainly the downtown Toronto council would approve an office tower on this location, because it would mean jobs, and assessment. We'd certainly, again, I'm pretty sure that a hotel would get approved on this site as well. So when I look at all of the options that could be done on this site, my recommendation to us and my advice to the residents is this is a very good proposal. You're going to be happy with it. Take it and thank the heavens that nothing else came in on this site. Thank you.
Okay. And other councillors to speak? Yep, Councillor Karygiannis, and then...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to quote from a Toronto Star article. This is an opinion piece, Saturday, November 28, 2009.
Need the mic.
Guilt over the child's death, November 25. Our family moved to Gilwood from the beaches 18 years ago, where our son Jonathan met T. Period, who was driving the car that crashed on Hill Crescent 8.5 months ago, killing our son. If only we hadn't moved here, our son would still be alive. But this is a wonderful neighborhood, and as Judy Kurtzel suggests in her article, it's not the neighborhood, but fate that took our son. All of the what-ifs won't bring him back. We heard, Madam Chair, that the accident that happened was a cause of concern. And I'm just reading this. This is from Heather Talbot. She's from Scarborough. This is the mother. And I think this was truly an accident. This was not because there was increased traffic. This is not going to cause, you know, the 100 cars that are going to park underground in the 125 space that they have units, 99 units. They got 130 parking space, 25 for visitors. There's not going to be access vehicles on the street. Even if people come to visit, there's not going to be people out there that will be creating more havoc about parking. We have no place to go, as Councillor de Beermaker said, in Toronto, but up. And if you visit some metropolitan cities around the world, you see buildings that are 70, 80 high, and people are getting along with each other. We heard about sidewalks. I bet you if Councillor Ainsley was supposed to go talk to his constituents, say, I would like to put a sidewalk here, there'll be a riot on the street. That'll be totally a riot. You're taking away my space. I got the same thing at Kennedy and Shepherd. I've got development happening in my area, probably more development than most of the councillors here. I've got, well, except my colleague in Agincourt Mall, you got 11 towers, I got 13 coming up at Briarwood. So, I mean, instead of saying, no, we don't want it, and we should say, this is reasonable. It is not something which is 20 stories high. It's not something which is 25 stories high of a tower for business. It is a low-rise, 8-story building that accommodates 99 units, that has 130 spaces of parking, and 25 of that is for visitors. I have a similar situation at Echo Point, and same land, and they've got 61 or 62 units for stacked townhomes. Same footprint. So the only thing you're getting is another 37, 38 units. But instead of arguing and cause this to go to the OMB, and you could end up getting something higher, it's a crapshoot when you go there. Or you might win. I'll say to you that this is not a bad development. I've seen the plans and the looks. I think it reflects good. I think the NIMBY attitude is something that we all express, and we all feel that we got to fight it. But this is people will be moving into your neighborhood. I heard from the lady that bought the house, that bought the property. I'm not sure if she's still here or she left. She's looking forward to coming to live with you. So instead of fighting the proposed new neighbors, I would say to you that you might want to reach out to them. I also heard about the Japanese Cultural Center. The person that mentioned that wasn't even sure if it was a cultural center or a senior's home or what they did there. You know, these are your neighbors. These are people that live with you. Instead of saying, yes, we would welcome you in a roll rise, there's a fight that's going on. I think the fight is coming because of the folks across the street, that they're in the 20-story building, and they don't like to have their views blocked. And they're saying, I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to move everybody that there's over there. Usually apartment buildings, I find that people that live in those apartment buildings are not mobile. I mean, they're not mobile in getting organized. They're not, they just go to work, they come back home, and that's it. You don't have residents associations that are, in my ward anyways, that are the president of the Resident Affairs Association lives in an apartment. I would say to you, the whole motivation here, that could be stand to be corrected, but it stands from the fact that we're going to block the view and we're going to fight it because we don't want our view blocked, and we're going to take this to the limits. Well, I want to thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting the staff recommendations and wish fast building and put it up because I think that the City of Toronto needs buildings like yours.
Thank you. And Councillor Kelly?
Well, thank you, Chair. Chair, I've been adjudicating planning submissions for over 25 years. And I think I've heard every story and listened to every argument under the sun. But having said that, I'm not dismissing the arguments and the stories that I heard today. I listened to them all very carefully. But what I have to do is apply the experience that I've had at this place as a counselor and downtown as the chair of the city's planning committee. What you learn in this job is that official plans and our guidelines, they're not set in stone. And the first time I heard that argument came from one of the wisest members of this council, I think, ever, and that's former Mayor Frank Faubert. And my experience has, I think, fulfilled his interpretation of the dynamics of the decision-making process at Scarborough Council. The building is attractive. That's a good-looking, if they're going to build what they're showing here, that's a good-looking building. Secondly, the issue of water. We've been told that there will be actually fewer problems with water than there are right now. Traffic. Almost every issue that is contentious has traffic at its core. And I've learned over time that the traffic engineers are accurate. This is an engineering discipline. These people bring an amazing amount of talent and insight into their evaluations of the traffic impact of a development in a community. And as well as their input, we have the city that reviews all the reports that go in, and I think we've got a first-rate professional civil service here in Toronto, and in particular in Scarborough. And so, Chair, I am enthusiastic in my support of the submission, and I think that a decade from now, after that building goes in, a decade from now, people are going to wonder what the fuss was all about.
Thank you. Any others to speak? Yep, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting staff recommendation. The planning process is very long, and they get a lot of studies from the applicant as well as review, and within our own staff, we are constantly looking at many things. That's why I asked the question that this piece of property is going to be along a major transit corridor, a proposed major transit corridor. And we are always reviewing it to see for density, as Councillor Maker was saying. We have to accommodate a lot more people coming in to live in the city. And I've been in those shoes where I've fought development before, and I've also been in the shoes here where I've got to make decisions as to what is good development and what is bad development. In my area recently, a 12-story rental apartment went in, and the people in the area fought it as well. But I end up supporting it. In fact, I support a staff recommendation that work with them to ensure that it's a good development. And the same issues came on: traffic, water, density, walkability, destroying neighborhood. All this came up. And when I look at this particular project and read the report, many of the issues has been mitigated. So I don't think we even have to wait a decade. I think 5 years after this goes up, people will be wondering what the fuss is all about. In my area, there was a piece of property, 10 acres, that people wanted to put high-rises up on. And I worked with the community, and we made it compatible with the neighborhood. 76 single-family dwellings went in because it's an inside infill development, not on the major arterial road. And the people was very upset at me for supporting it. They say it's going to destroy my neighborhood, it's going to bring values down. And when developers sold those homes, he sold it for $550,000. Before they was even finished, the homes were flipped for $800,000. And the people that said that it's going to destroy our neighborhood and were selling are kicking themselves after they sold, because their homes were now worth $1 million, and they sold it for $500,000. Okay? So I think we need to have foresight, we need to be visionary about how we want our city to grow. And this in this application, this proposal, I feel is a good development. So I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And any others speak? Yeah, Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the residents for coming in today. A number of them, I understand, signed the petition that were given to Councillor Crawford, and I appreciate that. I always appreciate having the feedback from my residents. And I look at this, and I'm going to be supporting the staff recommendations in the report. And I'm going to be doing that based on, I look at a development such as this through kind of two different perspectives. The first one is often, as we're at City Council, and we've reviewed avenue studies and the mid-rise neighborhood applications, and one of the things that our planning department always talks about is the number of people that are going to be coming to the City of Toronto over the next 20 years. I've seen estimates where, you know, the population of the City of Toronto is going to increase by 1/3, and we have to find suitable places for all of those people coming to this city to live. And the other lens that I look at in applications such as this is we're trying to make strong, vibrant communities. And, you know, one of the discussions I know that we've had, and I think we're going to be having it again, is about rooming houses and multi-unit homes where students are in or people are living. People are looking at the zoning bylaws and the official plans. They want the characters of their neighborhoods maintained. And I agree with that. And if we're going to maintain the characters of our single-family residential neighborhoods, one of the key places that we have to put people is on our avenues. And this is one of those examples. I know that when this application first came up, something at the corner of Markham and Eglinton being 4 stories, to me 4 stories was too small, too short, not tall enough. I think 8 stories at this location is very suitable, and it's a key component in making a strong neighborhood. You know, we look at all the different variables in that neighborhood about, you know, suitability for walking, access to services. And, you know, one of the concerns or the goals we're trying to achieve comes with public transit. And I've had a discussion with a former councillor, Moser in Ward 44. I've talked with Councillor Crawford about a continuous bus route along Kingston Road. And one of the things that the TTC always comes back about is you need to have the volume of usage. And it's the same with looking at the LRT that we want to extend from Kennedy Subway Station along Eglinton, right at the front door of this building, out to the University of Toronto Scarborough. And I know the planners all consider 4 stories in this area too small. I think the application that's before us meets all of the parameters that we want to look at when it comes to a strong neighborhood, planning and transportation, and the strong neighborhood that we're all looking at. And for that reason, I'll be supporting this application. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And any others? I think that's everybody, so we'll go to Councillor DeBearmaker. You moved the motion. You moved the staff recommendations. Okay, so we're voting on the staff recommendations. Sorry. Okay, all those in favor? Yes.
It's just to adopt. Yeah, just adopting. Yeah, adopt. You want them up?
Yeah.
But I think, oh, yeah, we know what, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, you can't get it?
Yeah, we know what they are, it's okay.
Okay, so Councillor DeMare Maker is moving staff recommendations, which is to approve the staff recommendation, to approve the report. Okay? Recorded vote, so all of those in favor. And in favor is Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Hart, Councillor Shan, Councillor Karygiannis, Councillor Lee, Councillor Holland, Councillor Ainsley, and Councillor DeBear Maker, and those opposed are Councillor Crawford, and so that passes. And so that passes, and thanks to everybody for coming out today. And I'm sure that Councillor Crawford will be working very closely with the developer and with the community as this continues to move forward. Thank you. So we have two more. Councillor Thompson held one item, and we also have one more on the agenda, which does have deputations, which is SC 2413, application to remove a private tree. I know. So what we'll do is, if everybody could leave the chamber who are leaving, just so that it's quite loud in the chamber. And sorry, on 2413 is the application to remove a private tree at 86 Conference Boulevard. And there's two speakers, Sean Overholt and Gavin Sullivan. Are they both here? No offense intended when I say that. Okay. Mr. Overholt? Thank you. And so you do have
Blame it on the media.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And so you have 5 minutes to
Okay,
speak.
thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, councilors, and thank you for your patience. My name is Sean Overholt. With my wife, we own 86 Conference. We've lived there for about 2 years now. And how the tree came on our radar was, I was away this past winter and my wife was home, and we had a small ice storm, not quite as bad as the one before. But when we had the ice storm, my wife was afraid. She slept in the basement because our bedroom is that back corner window there. And the tree was laying over and actually touching the ground. So her and the dog slept in the basement, which is what brought it to my attention. So when I got home, the ice had broken off and the tree had gone back, but there were still some branches rubbing the siding of our house and on the roof. And in the 2 years we have lived there are 3 different occasions I have climbed the tree to cut the tree. And my wife isn't too fond of me keep climbing the tree to have it cut. So that's why I called Gavin, who unfortunately he had to leave, who could tell you more technical aspects of the tree. He's passed some on to me. And his suggestion was to have an application to remove the tree because he felt it wasn't healthy. And our neighbors as well would like it removed. You can't really see, it's not the best picture. Unfortunately, it couldn't print color. Behind it is a back garden shed, and the tree is growing right on top of it pretty much. It's about 7 feet from the base of the tree to their back garden shed. And going kind of to my left when you look is our neighbors have a pool at which this tree overhangs. So, what else? So our concern is for the foundation of our house that the roots, we want to be proactive before it starts doing damage to our house and the roof. And I've been trying to maintain, like I said, trimming it back. I've been standing on the roof with a pole saw, cutting some branches back, and I've actually climbed the tree myself and then with a chainsaw and a rope and pull up the chainsaw. But it just keeps growing back small branches. And, sorry, sir, could you flip the picture? Thank you. So, the one of the base of the tree, please. Yeah, that one, yeah. So this is more technical stuff I was hoping Gavin would be able to talk about, but he was saying that moisture there is showing that it's diseased and that bacteria is growing there. And we've had the box Edler bug on the tree as well. And he says that that's what they're eating and feeding off of. And because of how the tree splits so low, that it's dangerous because it's going to rot there where the bacteria is growing, and that he's worried that it would split and fall. And that normally the crotch, I believe it's called, of the tree is much taller, closer to 8 to 10 feet. He also was talking about how the bark has grown in between the tree, and he said that was bad. And I'm sorry, I wish he was here to talk, but he had to go to work. He was here for a bit. Sorry, sir, could you flip one more picture? So you can see how low the branches are actually growing as well, that they're less than 6 feet from the ground. And they come from quite high, so in order to actually prune it, I have to climb quite high to trim them back, which I've done, but they keep coming back down. Sorry. Yeah, and there's another picture. You can see, you can barely see their back shed because of the tree is over it. And yeah, so we're just in disagreement with the city's arborist that came and said that it was a healthy, maintainable tree. So that's why I'm here today, is to hopefully have that overturned. And I just wanted to also say that in the back of our house, we have 7 other trees. We have 5 pine trees, I think they are, I'm not sure, some sort of coniferous tree, and then 2 other silver birches. So I'm not looking to clear cut my house. We enjoy the trees, but we're just concerned about this one particular tree. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Councillor DeBraymaker.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for coming in today. I see that you do have an arborist hired to help you.
Yes.
Have you had an arborist cut your tree before, or trim
No.
your tree?
No.
Just you climbing up the tree,
Yes,
giving
just
your wife a
myself.
heart attack?
Yes.
Yes, I've been there and on the, okay, and I would listen to it's your wife, I think.
My
you
wife,
said.
yes.
I would listen to your wife. Leave that chainsaw to somebody else. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hart.
Yes, just a couple of questions. Did your arborist mention to you that the root system could cause damage to your house? I heard you mention that. Did he say that it could?
Yes, and sorry, to that point, he also mentioned it's very hard to see, but it's in almost like a large planter box that's raised. So he says it doesn't have the best root system because it's not actually level with our ground. It was almost like they had a planter box there, and he feels like it was a seedling that no one cared for, and that's why it didn't grow a nice trunk. That was his explanation to me, is what he assumes, obviously. We don't know.
There's no evidence of that, though, is there?
Sorry?
No evidence of any damage to the base of your home?
No, not yet.
Another question, in terms of pruning, Councillor DeBaremaker asked if you've had it pruned by a professional, and you haven't. The city staff report talks about pruning as being the solution, perhaps, to your problem, that it is a healthy tree, but could use some pruning.
Yes.
What did your arborist say in that regard?
He said that it would have to be pruned continuously, so he said that it wasn't healthy because of the situation of the crotch, but also, yes, he could prune it, but that those little branches that are growing and then falling back down, they're going to keep coming back continuously. And that's what my point was, that we've lived there just over 2 years, and now I've done it on 3 different occasions where branches have been touching our house, and I've been trimming them back and continuously doing this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And others? No questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to staff? Okay, questions to staff? Councillor DeBarmaker?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, to our appropriate staff, you heard the concern that the roots might go and damage the foundation. Can roots damage foundations?
Roots cannot damage foundation, Madam Chair. Roots cannot damage foundations that are in good shape. Obviously, if the foundation is in disrepair, then many things will be getting into the foundation. It won't just be tree roots, but
Okay.
certainly typically when you find tree roots inside of houses or in foundations, the foundation was already in poor repair to start with.
And is it your opinion, reviewing this case, that if the, whichever arborist it may be, but the one that he's hired, if an arborist trimmed this tree properly and professionally, would that resolve most of the concerns you think the family has?
Yeah, if the tree was pruned properly, you would certainly get a longer time period before you get issues with the rubbing on the roof and that sort of thing. So I mean, I think we usually recommend pruning between 5 and 10 years. You should be able to hit that time frame if you have it professionally pruned.
Okay, so he wouldn't have to do it every year. If he got it done by a professional, trimmed it back properly, it would need its next quote haircut in maybe 5 years to 10 years.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Questions? No other questions? And Councillor Hart?
I don't want to ask the same questions as Councillor DeBarmaker. He asked the ones I was interested in, but just a very quick one. In terms of the actual pruning of the tree, and it hasn't been pruned by a professional recently, your report to me says very specifically if the tree is pruned on a continuous basis and one good pruning now, that it will be healthy. Did you notice any safety issues with respect to the tree at all?
No, the only safety issues brought up by the arborist and by the property owner was the tight structure of the tree, and that's part of this tree. The other thing being the main split, and the main split's going to collect water because that's where the water gets diverted as it comes down the tree, and that's sort of leaks out at the bottom there. We saw no evidence of any bacterial issues or any slime flux, which was noted in the arborist report. Everything seemed to be just collection of water and redistribution of water, and so the stem generally collects water and then allows the water to come down to the ground at the base. So because that tree comes to that connection, that's where the water connects before it goes onto the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and Councillor Kelly?
How far away from the house is the tree? It looks like it might be, what, 20, 25 feet?
I believe that's the best picture, Councillor. So Madam Chair, it's about 20 feet from the house, it would appear. I usually don't get overly worried about root issues with that sort of distance. If the issue where you would have any interference between the foundation and the tree would be right at the shoulder of the trunk of the tree going into the roots. So if your tree is physically against the structure, that's when you do have some challenges. Once you're more than a couple meters away, there's no issues.
I've noticed that with silver maples. But, yeah, that house's foundation, I think, is safe from that tree. You wouldn't disagree with that?
I would not disagree, and it's probably a poured concrete foundation, which makes it a little bit harder to fall apart.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Thompson?
I'm fine.
No.
Kelly just asked about
Okay. And to speak then? Yeah, Councillor Hart?
Just very quickly, trees, in particular trees on property lines are always challenging, and certain trees like the one that you have requires a fair amount of work and pruning and maintenance, but you know, the City of Toronto has a very strong position with regard to the tree canopy, and I will be supporting the staff recommendations.
Okay. And others to speak? Councillor DeBarmaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the owner for coming in and I think taking a very considerate approach to trying to maintain his property and do some very good things. Again, as I said before, I would certainly follow the advice of his wife and advise him not to do it. I've got some magnificent trees in my backyard, and I wouldn't climb up even the height of a ladder. So it is best to leave these things to a professional, especially when a chainsaw is involved. But this tree's been there, I think the owner said maybe 2 or 3 years he's purchased the house, and it's a beautiful part of the city. It's a beautiful part of Scarborough. Taken care of properly, this tree will probably be here when he reaches retirement age, and maybe when he's in his 80s and decides to move out of the house, maybe because it's too much maintenance. So I actually think this tree and trees in general add value to the property. Most people will pay more money for a nice tree like this in the backyard, so I'll support the staff recommendation to keep it up the way it is and encourage the owner to have that live tree care company give it a good haircut, not destroy it, but a really nice trim back, and enjoy it for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Great. Okay, any others to speak? Seeing none, and so just moving staff recommendation, that's Councillor Hart. And all those in favor? And opposed, and that carries. So that's just keeping in line with staff recommendation, and thank you for coming in. Sorry, thank you. And that comes to Councillor Thompson. So you have one more. We have one more.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I'm not going to be long. I just had a few questions for staff on this particular item, which is SC 20.15. Through you to staff, can you help me to understand the process that you put in place in order to review the implementation of traffic signals at this location?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, as a result of a request through the Councillor's office, we conducted our standard pedestrian crossing protection study at this location, where we looked at whether full traffic control signals were justified technically, and whether a pedestrian crossover, known as a PXO, if that were justified or warranted at this location. So we conducted our studies, and we determined that neither form of crossing protection is warranted at this time. The studies were done in 2015, and those values are considered valid for 3 years, and so they would still apply today.
Okay. You've got on page 3, you talk about the number of pedestrians observed crossing and so on. Do you have a time or when most of the pedestrian activities are taking place? Is it midday? Is it at 4 o'clock? Is it early in the morning? Did you have that time measured?
Yes, we conduct these studies over an 8-hour period, and that 8-hour period takes into account both the AM and the PM peak rush periods too.
Right. And so given the fact, and has there been any fatalities at all? Any accidents, motor vehicle accidents, and any other type of, it doesn't say here in terms of your collision history, it says 0, so it's been relatively free of traffic accidents and so on?
Yes, according to our information in the Toronto Police Services database, there is no significant collision history at this location.
What additional measures could be implemented to create that awareness for drivers and also for those who tend to cross at this area?
As part of our review, even though we identified that there was no crossing protection device warranted, we did recommend installing pedestrian warning signs upstream and downstream along the road, along Birchmount Road, and those have been installed. And we
They have been installed?
They have been installed. So that's a pedestrian. It says the yellow diamond sign shows a pedestrian symbol, and it gives a warning to the motorists that pedestrians can be crossing upstream from that sign, indicating that at this location, which does include TTC stops.
But it's sorry, just finish your point, sorry.
However, we could also follow up and see if there's anything further that can be done in terms of warning signs.
Now, do you need a motion from me here? Do you need an email? What do you need in order to engage in that?
Actually, no, that would be something that we can do through the 311 system and offline.
Right, okay. And if we were to, based on the numbers, I'm looking at the compliance level and so on, so minimum vehicle volume 17%, delay to cross traffic 29%. What does that mean? Is that the delay for vehicles or delay for pedestrians, individuals crossing?
Certainly the first criteria, minimum vehicle volume, that is the amount of traffic along Birchmount Road that does not justify crossing protection, but the second one, delayed across traffic, doesn't include pedestrians as part of that calculation. So it means that the road users are not delayed enough to make it possible that they might want to actually take the right-of-way inappropriately at this uncontrolled location. So it suggests that this location is still not really warranted for any kind of control, positive control.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, seeing none, then to speak.
Just briefly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's certainly important for us as a council and as a body and as citizens in the city that we take safety as a priority consideration at all times and so on. And my office was asked to take a look at this, and we've directed it to staff, and obviously it's not the first time. We've continued to review it. We've heard from staff that this does not meet the warrants and so on, and I know that we have from time to time moved items that didn't meet the warrants, but these numbers are significantly low. And while I am certainly concerned about the safety of people crossing, because I do see people crossing in this area sometimes without really paying attention and looking, and of course vehicles, there are some 20,000 vehicles that are traveling in this part of the roadway on a daily basis. So it becomes an issue, and I recognize the staff's response to the request and their recommendation, and I realize that if we were to approve this today, then we probably would have to do this a multitude of times across the city where it doesn't necessarily meet the warrants and people are trying to cross, and we're concerned for their safety. I'm happy that staff are going to look further in terms of what additional measures and perhaps suggestions that could be brought forward to hopefully minimize any potential element where someone would be seriously injured and so on. And so reluctantly, I accept and move the recommendations that are here, that it's not warranted at this particular time, and we will hopefully continue to work with the businesses in the area to help them to help their workers and so on, because it's primarily there are some residents that do cross, not a lot, fortunately, but to hopefully work with the businesses, and perhaps maybe that's something I'll work with staff on offline in terms of maybe going in and having some conversations with the people that are crossing, because clearly we don't want anyone to be injured, killed, or otherwise. Quite frankly, it is a huge issue because people are going to work, and many are running to catch a bus because they think this is the last bus and whatever, although it isn't usually, but they want to get home on time, and so they've got time deadlines. So I accept the staff recommendation, so I will simply just move that.
Great.
And thank the staff for the report.
Okay, yeah. And so just moving staff recommendation, all those in favor, opposed, and that carries. So that wraps up today's meeting, and so we have Councillor Hart, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills.
Yes, Madam Chair, that the Scarborough Community Council pass and declare as bylaws Bills 909 and 916 prepared for the September the 6th, 2017 meeting 24 of the Community Council.
And Councillor Ainsley, you have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill? Or sorry, yep. That's right. And shall these bills be passed and declared as bylaws? All those in favor, opposed, that carries. And Councillor Ainsley.
I would like to move that the Scarborough Community Council pass and declares a bylaw confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Scarborough Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting number 24 on September 6, 2016.
And shall this bill be passed and declared as bylaw? All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Thank you.
Lunchtime.
What's it doing outside?
Seems okay.